minus a mic? I don't have sound. I have sound. Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are experiencing some interesting light opportunities here, and so we may go from Tres Antime to much brighter than this. But in the meantime, I just can't help but think how good we're all going to look on television, this dim light. I think it's appropriate today, because of the National Day of Mourning for President Reagan, to begin with a few comments about President Reagan, who will be interred tonight overlooking the Pacific Ocean at sunset. It's been a remarkable week of events, and I have been struck by the honor that has been flowing toward the president and toward the presidency. I think there are a number of subtexts that I have observed, and that is that the man himself has been hugely honored around the world for many of his achievements, probably the most notable of which was the winding down of the Cold War. I noticed, too, that as far as the political differences are concerned, while there were huge political differences while he was in office, those have been smoothed over, and there has been an outpouring of genuine respect and affection for Ronald Reagan, the man. And in addition, I noticed that the office of the presidency has been honored around the world, and that's something that's important for all of us to remember. If you have the opportunity to be outside of the country and take a look at some of the newspapers or watch television, you will note that the office of the presidency is enormously important throughout the world. So I'd like to let us have just a moment of quiet reflection here to honor and respect the passing of Ronald Reagan. Thank you, and I don't know if you can hear the band in the background, but that might be a fitting tribute as well. Can you hear it back there? I think you would have enjoyed that. Well, now for today's program. I'm going to have a little bit of trouble seeing. It has nothing whatsoever to do with age. It has merely to do with the lighting. We're going to welcome Jack Levine today of Advocacy Resources, who's going to be speaking about our children, our future. But before we do that, we want to have some of our City Club announcements. And I want to mention that our next forum, next Friday, will be on the state of the counties. And Diane Lynn, Multnomah County Chair, will be here, and so will Tom Bryan, the Chair of Washington County. We had asked and been accepted by Bill Kinnemer of Clackamas County, but as you may know, City Club has a long-standing rule that if a person is running for office, they cannot appear on this podium except in a debate forum. So we will have just the two county commissioners tomorrow and find out what's been happening since Measure 30. We know what's been happening in Multnomah County. The upcoming special events, of which we have many, on June 24th at the Convention Center at 5:30 p.m., we're going to have a co-sponsored event with the Free Press, and it's a town hall meeting on the future of the media. We'll have two of the federal communications commissioners there, Michael Copps and Jonathan Adelstein, and they were the only two dissenting voices on the recent passage of the new FCC rules allowing the multiple ownership of media. This is not an official FCC meeting, but comments will be collected and they will be given to the FCC and to the Congress, who's going to be considering whether or not they're going to deal with this matter in a different way. I believe, it's in the proposed 2005 Telecommunications Act. On June 17th at, it's called World Cup Coffee, we'll have a new leaders event, and that will be, I think those are at 5:30. And this particular forum is going to be on good information, better choices for healthcare consumers. And it will feature Judith Hubbard, who's a professor at the University of Oregon, and Philip Marshall, who's with WebMD. Should be an interesting one. And our Citizens Read Book Club event will be held on June 28th at the Zimmerman Community Center at 7:15 p.m. The book is The Birth of the Chaotic Age by D. Hawk, the man who started Visa, and he reflects on all the competition and the chaotic, what he terms chaotic events regarding that, and it's going to be moderated by former Governor John Kitzhaber. Should also be an interesting event. Now, our After-Work series, True to the Food, continues. We've had the first one, and we have two more, and it was very well received, should be fun. You can buy individual tickets. We are also well on our way for our citizen salons. The first one has been held, and the next two in June are sold out. I think there are a few tickets remaining for two of them in July. So if you're interested in buying tickets for our annual fundraising event, Citizen Salon, please let the staff know, and we'll see what we can do. All of this information can be found either in the bulletin or if you go to our website at pdxcityclub.org. You'll be able to get the information there and buy tickets online. Broadcast of the City Club programs this quarter is made possible in part by corporate underwriting from Pacific Air, Portland General Electric, and Zimmer Gunsel Fasca, and we are very grateful for their support. Now, to get to today's program, I want to first introduce Brent Stewart, who's the new president and CPO of the United Way of the Columbia Willamette. He's been with the United Way and served in many positions over 19 years. In fact, he comes our way from the East Coast originally. He has worked with the United Way of Westchester and Putnam counties in White Plains, New York. He worked with the United Way of Battle Creek, Michigan. And most recently, he was president of the United Way of Snohomish County in Everett, Washington. He only became president here on March of this year, so we're anxious to see what plans he has. He says that he wants to strengthen the United Way's effectiveness as a change agent and to promote long-term solutions for community problems. And he will introduce today's speaker, who is Jack Levine. So Brent Stewart, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Carlene. It's very much an honor to be here. As Carlene said, I just came to town March 1, and it's 90 days, almost 90 days ago, and I spent the majority of those 90 days out of the United Way building, just out in the community, meeting and talking with individuals, and trying to get a sense of what is the Portland region like, and what are the important clubs that I ought to connect with? And all of them have said, you have to connect with somehow the City Club. You have to get in front of that group, and if you're able to do that, then you've done something. So I feel that I've done something this afternoon, and so again, I'm very, very happy to be here. In fact, in some ways, it feels like I've made it to the big show. For anybody who's a baseball fan out there, you have an understanding of what I'm saying there. I'm also very honored to be your president of your United Way, and my pledge to you, my commitment to you is that I will work 125% to make sure that our United Way is doing all that it can to make this community a much better place to live and certainly a much healthier community. You know, we have a number of challenges at United Way, but I have to say the challenges are pretty small compared to all the great opportunities that we have. And when I think about opportunities, I think about the things we can do as a United Way, the things we can do together as a community to address some of our community's most pressing issues. Issues such as the topic we're going to be talking about today, the lack of investment in early childhood development. And if we are to think of ourselves as a healthy community, then we must certainly invest more in early childhood development. The United Way Board of Directors recognized this almost 5 years ago as it launched its Early Childhood Initiative Success by Six program to change young children's lives by getting them ready to enter kindergarten with the tools they need to succeed. And yesterday, we came together as a community, and I think some of you were there. We came together as a community for the 5th annual Early Childhood Advocates Forum, hosted by the Multnomah Commission on Children and Families and co-sponsored by United Way and the Children's Institute. The forum brought together more than 200 people to take action for young children in our community. And of course, leading the pack, leading the discussion, is today's keynote speaker at today's lunch, Jack Levine. And having spent several moments with Jack yesterday, I know you'll find his address very insightful, thoughtful, and even stimulating. I think you're really in for just a tremendous treat. Let me share a little bit with you about Jack at this point. He holds a master's degree in child development and family studies from Purdue University and a degree in English literature from Hunter College. He's a native of Long Beach, New York. Jack has been a teacher, an urban youth counselor, and for 4 years, and there's a story behind this, and for 4 years he worked as a waiter and dining room captain in resort hotels in New York and Miami Beach. His first professional position in Tallahassee in 1978 was teaching English social studies and physical education at a residential delinquency center. Jack served on the charter board of Voices for America's Children and currently advises the Family Institute of the College of Human Sciences at Florida State University. He was a founding member of the Florida Commission on Responsible Fatherhood. A graduate of Leadership Florida, Jack was the first recipient of Leadership Florida's Distinguished Alumnus Award. He has also been honored with the Florida Juvenile Judges Media Award, the Voice for Children Award from the Children's Home Society of Florida, and in 1990, he was named Floridian of the Year by the Orlando Centennial. And so let's give a warm welcome to Jack, welcome him to the podium, and also to Portland.
Thank you, Brent, and thank you, Corleen and Tamsin, and each in the sound of my voice. It really is a pleasure for me to be here in beautiful Portland. I arrived Tuesday afternoon, a day early than I expected, to really enjoy the sights of the city and walk the streets and take photographs. And I want to compliment each of you who has any role in not only the preservation of architectural wonders and the rededication to that which our forebears have brought, but the transportation system in this community is absolutely astonishing in its planning. And I want to compliment anyone, Phyllis, anyone who had any role in creating this very, very accessible community. I really do enjoy coming here and hope to come back. I hope to bring some more sunshine from the state of Florida. And in fact, I hear a weather forecast that you will enjoy your Rose Festival in sun's graces tomorrow, and I hope so. I'm unfortunately going to be leaving this evening. I am here to share with you my perspective through the lens of being a child advocate, and advocacy is not a very, very scary profession. It's about giving voice. The middle of the word advocacy is specifically voca, the voice. You can be a very smart person, and I know by virtue of your attending this luncheon, you qualify for that. You can be a very emotional person, a very caring and feeling person, and I'm also conjecturing that that's true for each of you. But being smart and being caring does not in and of themselves make you an advocate. What makes you an advocate is your voice, is sharing what you know and what you feel with others. And the core of advocacy is relationships, is influence, is communication with someone else with whom you can share what you feel and what you believe. And I've been graced to be an advocate professionally now 27 years, to this day, and hopefully in God's good graces into the future. My father was 60 when I was born. I don't hear an amen for that at all. I'm telling you, you speak to the African American Episcopal Church and you get an amen on that one. I guess you can say my dad was the oldest dad on the block. In fact, we once did a little ask around of all of my friends in this little community where I grew up, in a beach community outside of New York, and my father was older than all of my friends' grandfathers. Now, in 1951, when I was born, 60 was kind of old. I am here to attest that 60 is no longer old. I knew I'd get an email on that one. As a matter of fact, the closer I approach to that wonderful golden mark, the younger I feel. It could be illusionary, but I really do believe that the 60 of today is the 40 of yesterday. I feel that, and my associates and friends do too. And again, I think it might be mass delusion, but I think of other things, about the energy, the creativity, and the impact of age 60. But not only was my father an older man, my father was a blind man. Now, he wasn't blind his whole life. My older brother, and older brothers are like this, could be like this, had me convinced as a child that my father was struck blind when he saw me as a baby. And some of you may have older brothers like that. He even had one of these pictures of me taken by a Brownie Hawkeye camera, and you know how kids used to squint to self-defense from that big flash bulb, and there was a little drool coming out of this side of the mouth. This picture was proof positive I was ugly enough to strike the man blind. Well, the reality is, at age 52, which happens to be my age today, my father woke up with blurry vision. This was 1943. My father was born in 1891. He did not like the fact that he had blurry vision that morning, went to the doctor, who confirmed the fact that he had blurry vision, went home that night, had a sleepless night, and by the next afternoon, midday, he was 100% totally blind, never saw light again for the rest of his life, and he lived to 84. Well, he wasn't that blind. 8 years later, I came along. They say certain senses are accentuated when others go away. My job as a child was reading for my father. My father was a voracious reader. He had never gone to school one day in his life, spoke 5 languages, and was a voracious reader, especially in the realm of politics. My father spoke Yiddish, his native language, Russian, the environmental language where he grew up, Polish, English, and politics. Full fluency in all 5. On any given day, I think he used all 5. I only inherited 2 of those languages, English and politics. Now, I'll never forget when I'd read certain newspaper columns, opinion columns, editorials. You know, I grew up in New York. There are opinions in New York. I would never forget the light that would go off in my father's blind eyes when I got to a certain part of one of these columns, and I knew I was doing my job. Something new, something that gave him a new thought about his community and our future. Well, friends, I'm here to attest that I believe I've only had one job in my whole life, and that is translating for the blind. I'll give you a couple of examples. Journalists. I have a deep and, as I shared, lifelong admiration for the written word, journalism, newspapers, and now, exceedingly so, for the broadcast journalists. This is a hard job, folks. Putting on paper, putting on the air, radio, television, the events of the day. But let me tell the truth about journalists. They don't know very much about what they're broadcasting or writing. They need sources. They need information. They need statistical information. For example, today is the day of birth of 137 Oregon babies. Today is their birthday. Your neighbor to the south, California, today is the day of birth of about 1,200 California babies. My state of Florida, 600 today. By the way, in the United States of America, Today is the birthday of 11,460 newborns. A newborn every 6 seconds. And so another, to the great drum roll behind me. Picture your biggest stadium filled to capacity that is 1 week of the United States babies. I give you that statistic because it is not just a statistic. The health of today's babies here in Oregon, throughout this nation, and in fact throughout the world, is an essential ingredient in laying the foundation for our economic future, for our future as a species. Now, journalists need to know that, and they need to know the impacts of what happens when babies are born healthy versus what happens when they're not. And another population of the blind, if I may, and please, let no one be offended, former, current, or future elected official. Elected officials are among the blind. Truly. How can they possibly know all they need to decide about in their voting? From property appraiser to the presidency. They need advisors. They need information. They need inspiration. They need to know facts and perspectives and impacts from other experts. And again, here too, I have been graced to have a role in translating for public officials the impact of their decision making, sometimes life and death decision making. Because if you vote to withhold medical treatment from a pregnant woman or from any other category of need, and that becomes your public policy, you are in fact perhaps contributing to the death. So I say an advocate's true mission is to illuminate, to illustrate, to articulate the reality of families' lives for our media and for our public officials and for an important facet of our community, which is the business and civic sectors. And so we are here today. In the Battle of Britain, and you know the history, 1940, the Luftwaffe came in on night raids, nearly nightly, for a series of weeks. And the citizens of London were squirreled deep, deep into their hiding places, their shelters. And after one particularly violent night, the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, was doing a tour, which he did frequently. And a BBC reporter found him and put a microphone in his face and said, "Mr. Prime Minister, with all of this destruction, with all of this fear, with all of this tension that is a nightly fact of life for the citizens, what will you do first thing tomorrow?" And he said, "Tomorrow we will put milk into babies." Friends, I take that as the great metaphor. The great metaphor for priorities. The great metaphor for where we need to be at the core of our human existence, which is, amidst all of our challenges and all of our stresses and all of our needs, if we fail to put milk into babies, we are doomed. And I call it a metaphor because the nurturance of our babies nutritionally is not separate in my mind from the nurturance of our babies emotionally. Babies who do not have connection by positive relationship with their caregiver, in the ideal their parents, will not do well. They will fail to thrive. They will not be emotionally well. just like withholding of nutrition would make them physically ill. But it's not just in babyhood. It's in toddlerhood. It's in the early years of preschool, because what we know now, and we didn't know 30 years ago, is the core of brain development, the very synapse, the very formation of brain cells to fire in its electrical wonder to each other, which is the core of learning, not only learning of fact and cognitive well-being, but the learning of love happens in the first 3 years of life. It is one of nature's wonders. It is a scientific fact. And children who are not in the environment in which they have positive modeling, loving interaction and nurturing, and hearing language before they are required by nature to speak, in feeling the positive interaction that's necessary, will not do well. That's a fact. And the question we must ask here in Oregon, in my state of Florida, throughout this nation and in fact the world, is how are we assembling the right ingredients for bringing forward that early nurturance? And at this point, we have far to go. Further to go than our science dictates. I'll give you 2 examples. Number 1. Our parents of every class, but particularly of class of risk, we call it, which are usually single parents, parents who have economic stress. Their worries are about decent housing, decent health care, access to basic services. Our parents are the key ingredient, I believe, to proper nurturance of our children. But see, we know that there are some folks who spend more time researching the automobile options than they do researching their own child development. We have some folks who have themselves not been properly nurtured in their young years, and perhaps believe that violence is a good communications tool with young children. It is not. You cannot physically punish an 18-month-old, and expect that child to learn cause and effect. What that child learns in the toddlerhood is that might makes right, is that violence prevails. And that's wrong, but some people don't know that. And another example is when children are cared for outside of the home setting, we have to have positive, nurturing adult relationships in our child care centers, in our early care centers, so that those who are basically taking the role of parent for those 5, 7, or even 12 hours a day have all the tools they need to do their job. And at this point, they don't. The highest turnover, least paid profession in America are direct service child care. Higher turnover than convenience store clerks, lower paid than every other profession. Friends, I have nothing against the fast food industry, but my God, we have child care workers quitting their jobs for a raise to turn hamburgers and fry fish. That's wrong. And we need to make it right. There is a person in this room whose name is Nikki Denmark. I don't know if you've ever met her. I have. She's an employee of one of your early Head Start centers here in this community, a college graduate from Hood College. She is here in this room. We should be honoring Nikki Denmark. We should be holding her up, and those who have direct service responsibility for our future generations in high regard. We should be paying her more. We should be nurturing her career. I honor her for who she is and what she does, but the community needs to honor her even more so, to keep her on track and make sure that her future in this great profession is one that she wants to stay at. Nikki, would you say hello? Where do we go from here? First of all, none of today's Oregon babies, 137 on average, are born Republican or Democrat. This is the issue, the investment in children, which I believe in all my heart has to be the true nonpartisan issue. Neither party in all of their workings owns the babies, owns the families, owns the early investment potential. We've got to make sure that as we articulate this issue, it is not a captive of any one party or the other. And I'll tell you why. Because in essence, this is not just about one sector, the governmental sector. This is about the privacy of families and the responsibility of the corporate and business sector. So I believe there can be a great unification, and there should be, around this issue of investment. A third of our ninth graders are not graduating, folks, and a third of our toddlers are not prepared for kindergarten, and it's the same third. If anyone believes that ninth grade failure begins in eighth grade, they are wrong. Ninth grade failure almost always begins in the early years. So, to build our economic future, to build our society's well-being and public safety, to reduce crime rates, to increase economic productivity, we've got the magic inoculation and its quality early investment in our young families and their children. And yet, we have children on waiting lists for those services, as if there's a freezer in Salem, or here in Portland, or anywhere else in this state or nation, in which we store our 2-year-olds in a freezer and then thaw them out some other time. No, 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 no. There is no such freezer. Children who don't get the care they need don't get better. They get badder. And we have the opportunity and the obligation to do it better. So, does it cost some money? Yes. What of anything of worth does not cost some money, with the exception, as they say, of love? And I know sometimes that has its price. But let me tell you something else. When it comes to kids, it's not whether you pay, it's when. For failure of early investment, your results are higher child abuse rates, higher crime rates, lower productivity, and less educational success. It is not a question of getting away with it. You don't get away with it. Those costs grow, the problems accelerate, and regrets are inevitable. So I say, as a child advocate, I say, now is the time for this great community, this great state, and certainly this great nation with its wealth to invest in a tremendous surge of early preventative services for families and children, because, friends, I believe we don't have a choice. Our children are not statistics. Our children are arms that hug or desperately need to be hugged. Our children are voices that sing, sometimes in sign language. Our children are legs that run, sometimes with a brace or a prosthetic. But most important, friends, our children are sets of eyes which will look at pictures of us when we're gone and judge us about the quality of life we've left. It's about legacy, folks. It's our move. Let's go forth and do the right thing. Thank you. How are you doing?
Excellent. You're in great shape. Well, I would say that the children have a wonderful advocate, and we need at least 49 more Jack Levines, because the eloquence with which he pleads their case is very remarkable. I'd like now to introduce Tamsin Wassell, who is our board host today, and she's first vice president, chair of the research board, and she's a partner in RTC, a management consulting firm. She will have the opportunity to ask the first question, and then I ask other City Club members only to line up behind the microphone and ask a question in short form so that he will have the opportunity to answer in long form. Thanks.
Thank you, Corleen. And I also want to acknowledge and thank the club's long-term study committee that's sitting here in the front table on early childhood development. You all should be looking forward to their report, which are going to be issued tomorrow. Oh, no, this fall. We'll be getting a report on early childhood development from this committee. Is working very hard. And I also want to acknowledge Marilyn Richin for guiding me in my thinking for this question, so thank you. So Jack, this is a public policy organization, so I have to, ask those kind of tough questions. Several years ago, the City Club took a position on a ballot measure endorsing funding for a children's initiative. And part of what happened out of that was kind of some tumult on which programs to fund and how we were going to figure out whether they were effective. And actually this week, Brent, I wrote a check to the United Way, and in doing so, I was looking at the number of different agencies and organizations that are also in this field of child support development, all of those things. So Jack, could you respond to perhaps a concern that there's actually a lot of cooks in this very difficult kitchen? And whether there should be that many cooks or whether it can be streamlined, and how do ordinary folks like me know that I'm giving my money to the right thing that needs to be done?
I truly believe that efficiencies and economies among the varying health and human service organizations can always be improved and should be improved, and especially now, when we know precisely what interventions and preventative strategies work. Now is the time for those who have disparate letterheads, disparate parking places, disparate boards of directors to convene as never before and organize and perhaps even merge, so that we can have the confidence being built by the private donors as well as public officials that our dollars are doing the best thing. That could sound a bit like rhetoric, so let me give you the reality. The reality is that there are strategies that we know work. Prenatal care works. Immunization works. Early screening and diagnosis of vision and hearing problems work. Quality early childhood development works. I would say that it is incumbent upon United Way, my friends at United Way, any foundation, any organized effort for philanthropy to bring together the true needs assessment in a community, figure out how many kids need the service, what are the costs of the service, what are the delivery systems of the service, and if there are those who are competing for the dollar and are not showing a plan of cooperation, I am sorry, but you do not merit support. The idea here is to conjoin all we know about need, develop the program strategies, and I'm sorry, but we may have too many providers in terms of overhead. So I come from the position of saying, let's test folks about their varying missions. Let's bring them forward and ask them to prove that they need to have 3, 4, 5, or even 10 different organizations trying to serve the same population. Let's economize, let's make it more efficient, but let's go forward and invest in what works. And I think that's a strategy that Portland is ready for. That's what I learned over the last 2 days in being in your good city.
Chris Smith, City Club member. Jack, I was very struck by your definition of the word advocate, and I have a vested interest in that because I chair the advocacy board for City Club. And the advocacy function in City Club is relatively new. We're historically a research organization, And we came to the conclusion a few years ago it was no longer enough to put out reports. We had to go advocate for the recommendations of those reports. But in building this function in the club, I was very surprised to find that some people have a problem with the word advocacy. That to some people, advocacy has become associated with special interests and lobbying. And I guess I would ask you what you would say to folks who think advocacy has a negative connotation. What's your response to that?
There's a difference in my mind between lobbying and advocacy. Lobbying makes it hard for public officials to say no. Advocacy makes it easy for them to say yes. That's not just a twist of phrase. Lobbying at its core has an implied threat. It is usually backed up by political action committees, by the power of saying, I can defeat you in election or I can support you in re-election. Advocates at the core do not involve themselves in the political partisan warfare. They do not make promises they can't keep. They bring information forward effectively, convincingly, and then let the public official make determination based upon best facts. So I think there's a tremendous difference in traditional lobbying and the emerging advocacy. But one more point, which is essential. I've got a tremendous problem with partisan politics anyway. I think partisan politics has become the disease of democracy. I think partisan politics, we are at a point in which it is buying so much negativity, so much attack, so much bad blood, that we are acting as if good people are the enemy. I believe that we should be putting our dollars where they do the best good. Do you know that we are about to expend almost $4 billion in this nation for partisan politics this year at a time when the total United Way contributions will only be about $2.2 billion? We are almost 70% higher in partisan giving than we are in charitable giving to United Way, and I think that's wrong. Now, Chris, that was not the intention of your question. But I think we need to confront anybody, whether he be President George W. Bush or his predecessor Bill Clinton in his day, because they acted very similarly, when they fly into a community and walk out with $3 million, a half a mile from a hungry child, I think that's wrong. And I think it's wrong because it's what we're buying is negativity, and we're sending the wrong signal to a young person that this great democracy, which our men and women are dying for in foreign soils, is a dirty game, and we need to clean it up, and you can start right here. Give contributions to charities in the name of your favorite candidate, but don't feed the negative political machine, because like any digestive process, you know what comes out the other end.
Chris Allman. I'm on City Club Early Childhood Care and Education Committee, and my question has to do with the misperception of how issues of early child care have only to do with low-income families. Over the past few decades, we've seen more families depend on two incomes, and especially in economic downturns, we see the safety nets falling apart for two-income families too. Do you have any comments regarding this issue of two-income families in early child care?
Do I have any comments, Chris? Poverty is a tremendous burden and reality for so many families. Wage earning is simply not anymore a reward for many families, bringing them out of the grips of poverty, which of course translates to less likelihood of decent housing, less likelihood of access to health care, and an array of family services. But there are more than one poverty in our community. Poverty of money is one definition, which we need to work on. But there's also a poverty of time and a poverty of emotion. I am seeing families of mixed incomes, of moderate to upper incomes, that are separating themselves from the very children within their homes. I've seen parents in the front seat of a car with a toddler hopefully safety seated in the back seat, blabbering on the cell phone incessantly. It used to be that's the only time when parents could really have some private time with their children and actually talk to them. But we have so highly teched ourselves as if we're so self-important that we always have to be in touch. I know dads coming home from work, and before they even hug that child, they are logging on to the internet. That is wrong. So there are many poverties to address. And in terms of dual working families, I am telling you, for most families, that's a necessity. We have to have a set of service systems in child care and in education that recognize that reality. And children are not safe at 2:30 in the afternoon when school lets out. We have to have a system of after-school programs and weekend programs because, trust me, isolation for children of any age is not a good thing. You know the cliche. Idleness is the devil's workshop. The influences of our children when they are not well supervised are terrible. The highest spike among teen pregnancy and among crime are the hours of 3 to 7 in the afternoon, when responsible adults are in nowhere to be found for our children. So we have lots to do, but investing in what works, especially leveraging the necessity of services for families, has got to be a community priority. As I shared, I don't think we have a choice. Sir.
Steve Novick, City Club member. Mr. Levine, your home state could actually be described as a poster child for muddle-headed child advocacy. A couple of years ago, you passed a massive class size reduction initiative, which obviously is based on concern for children, but it didn't bring along any new money to pay for it. So if I read your papers on the web correctly, you're now in the process of building classrooms out of toothpicks while cutting health care for pregnant women and for children. Would you agree that until the public develops a better understanding of the trade-off between funding for different types of services and between taxes and services, the likelihood that we'll have rational public policies with regard to children or anything else is fairly minimal?
Your first name again, sir? Steve. Steve, I'm going to give you a Tallahassee answer. Yes and no. Yes, we have tremendous needs in our state of Florida. Second fastest growth state in the nation, second to only tiny Nevada. We have tremendous needs for access to services, for quality health care and education. But let me tell you something else, Steve. Between 1990 and 1994, Florida has come further and faster than any state in the nation in the improvement of the well-being of our children, despite our tremendous growth. We went from 48th in the Kids Count Indicator in 1990, trailed only by Mississippi and Louisiana and the District of Columbia, to now 34th. Now, that came at a time of enormous growth, enormous transitions in our diversities, in our needs. We are investing in children. All we could and should be doing? Absolutely not. But we have tripled access to early childhood development services. We have one of the lower infant mortality and morbidity rates, although yours is the best in the nation, and I compliment you for that. But the comparison in terms of progress in the state of Florida has been second to none in the nation. Now, where do we go from here? We have got to face realities. Perhaps this is true in Oregon, but I know this to be true in Florida. You have to pay for your good intentions. Tax havens frequently can be very hellish for children, especially children who have needs. So we are on a mission to reform our tax structure, which is not easy. But the good news is we don't need unanimity, we simply need majority, and we are working on that. And I would welcome, Steve, you to come visit us in Florida when the chill wind blows, and I would love to host you to show you some of our achievements and our victories.
Frank Rudloff, City Club member and architect, and I appreciate your admiration of the city, and of the buildings of it. But I really wonder. You talk about programs and the need for programs, but it seems to me that one of the biggest problems that we have is the fact that cities don't work the same for children as they do for adults. And there's, an ever more, you talk about isolation, but isolation between generations and between the ability of children to navigate the city in the same way as adults do, and the ability for children to observe or have interactions with adults in an unplanned manner. And I wonder how much of the problem you see as being spatial as much as programmatic.
Frank, I really like you. I like you because you are putting your finger on an essential problem that I think we have aggravated by separating the generations. I am an opponent, an arch opponent of age-segregated housing. I am an arch opponent from separating families according to age and income, and I know the real estate realities, but in essence, we've got to find a way to have more integration, not only in racial terms, but in economic and community terms. And let me tell you my two ideas around that. Number one, I think we have to relook at neighborhood as a place of nurturance. I think we have to have multi-use facilities that are both for seniors and for juniors. We know there are a population of our elders who are alone, and that's not a good place for them to be. They need some, quote, daycare services. At the same time, we know there are our young children who need some daycare or child care services. Why aren't we co-locating? Why aren't we using the same power sources, the same utilities, the same transportation lines for intergenerational services? If you're doing that, I compliment you. If you're not, or doing it minimally, I want you to do that within the context of the reality of families. But the second reason may be even more important. When you separate, you have a fear of the unknown. When you separate, like we did in this horrible history of racial segregation, which still exists in some communities, you don't know each other, you don't have comfort levels, and therefore you don't work and plan together. It comes back to the key point, Frank, which is relationships. I think we can build better relationships if we integrate our services and our communities and our neighborhoods more. And architecture and advocacy have a very, very similar language. You need to have a strong foundation so the edifice stands a long time. So I think we have to have a new connection between the great architects and the builders of our community and the child advocates. And I'm sure you would like to volunteer for this child care study group.
Hello, Jack. I'm Chris Krink, City Club member and President and CEO of Albertina Care Centers here in Portland, Human Service Organization. You make, and by the way, I'm a native Oregonian. Welcome to Oregon. You make a very compelling case. In fact, I was at the forum yesterday where I heard a Minnesota banker and economist make a very compelling economic case for investment in early childhood development and education. So what's the problem? What do you see as the one, two, three largest barriers to making this investment come true?
You mentioned Chris Rolnick, who is with the Federal Reserve and the head of research in Minneapolis, who has really created a breakthrough in economic analysis of the value of early investment. And anyone who does not know his work, I highly recommend through Ann Stone or others to gain access to that data. We're having breakthroughs, Chris. Our breakthroughs are research-based, and that's good. We are now proof positive what works and what doesn't work, and we didn't know that 10 years ago and 15 years ago. But another breakthrough, I think, has to be an integration of the generations around policy work. I know a lot about seniors. I was the child of a senior, and I live in Florida. I know a lot about the energy, enthusiasm, and support that our seniors will give, given the opportunity of not only volunteerism and time, but actual political force on behalf of children and children investments. Most seniors I know that they're not going to heaven with a U-Haul. They know it's about being remembered for doing the right thing. So I think the emergent movement is around intergenerational advocacy, which will benefit both of the extreme generations, youngest and oldest, and will give progress for the future. And finally, I think it's just self-evident. that we've got to do the right thing at the right time. We cannot continue to pay for failure if we know how to invest in success. And a 1/3 dropout rate, a teen crime rate, and a high teen risk rate, including pregnancy, AIDS, and drug and alcohol crisis, is not where we should be putting our dollars. We need to do it now in the emergency, but we need to prevent another generation of that kind of negative behavior. And I think, in my optimism, that we're on the right track.
Carol Witherell, City Club member, thank you very much. We've heard a lot this week about a former president who has, quote, restored our optimism and sense of hope and belief in ourselves. I find myself asking whether we aren't actually living in cheery denial, and whether our current economic infrastructures and policies, which have advantaged many but seriously harmed and disadvantaged many others, has caused us to lay the blame, not there, but at the feet of teachers and families. Is this a very vicious form of cheery denial, even as we strive to make teachers stronger and families stronger? And what can we do to see the view from elsewhere, how many people experience their daily life today?
Carol, I think we need to spend about a month together to analyze that question for all of its importance and its dimensions. Not having a month, let me try a couple of minutes. First of all, I do agree that it is a very, very difficult and, I think, disastrous policy when we have a tremendous, tremendous difference between the true haves and the true have-nots, especially in our culture. I believe that we have done too much in terms of tax policy and in terms of individual incentives to do well by the wealthy, and I bless them for their investments in this economy, but unfortunately at the expense of so many others, especially in this country that can, I think, afford a lot for the least. But I also think we need to come to a point in which we have to realize that we're only at about a 48% frequent voter rate. We extol the virtues of this great democracy, but in essence, if you are a parent under age 30 with an income of under $25,000, which is a whole lot of families, the likelihood that you are a frequent voter is about 12%. So I would advise anyone in the sound of my voice that if they want to get serious about public policy, then they got to get serious about civic engagement. And let's not forget that in 1919 it was illegal for women to vote in this nation, save one state, which was Wyoming, in state elections. And let's not forget that in 1963 in this nation, there were counties, especially in the hard, deep South, where 90% of the population was African American and only 10% of the voters were African American. Let's not forget that civil rights, gender equality, needs to now turn to parental rights and access to the voting and to the tools of democracy for another generation of voters. I think we can turn public policy problems into positive solutions if we had a greater turnout and a greater public discourse. And again, I compliment the City Club for moving in that direction.
I'm sorry, Kurt, we're out of time.
Kurt, I'm not running away.
He'll get a chance to talk to you after. I understand you're going to be here for a meeting with the Early Childhood Education Group, so he will be available for a little while, and he will be speaking with this group. In any case, I'd like to pick up on one of his themes because I think it's a good theme for us as City Club to remember, and that is let's do some thinking about intergenerational advocacy. I think it's an excellent point and something we should consider. And I don't know when I've heard a more inspirational speaker and a better advocate for a policy. So thank you so much, Jack Levine.